Hey guys, Derek here from Back to Reality. And despite our still snow-covered garden, some would say that this is actually a perfect time to begin direct sowing some of our cold hardy veggies. You see, in our last video, we talked about starting some of our seedlings outdoors in the winter using old plastic containers as mini greenhouses. That method was called winter sowing, and we were originally inspired to try it based on a number of your recommendations. So just before the end of winter, we planted 13 different types of vegetables, herbs, and flowers, and have left them outside exposed to the elements ever since. The main advantages to that approach, when compared to the usual methods of starting seedlings indoors, are that it removes the need for costly grow lights, all of the space to house them, and a lot of the work involved with babysitting them while they grow, and hardening them off before planting out into the garden. Plus, perhaps the most important thing, from my perspective at least, is that in removing ourselves from the process as much as possible, we in turn hand our seedlings over to the natural processes that we so often try to emulate. In essence, when it comes to germination, the seeds just sort of know when the conditions are right and will happily take care of themselves when they're ready. Or in other words, sometimes we just need to get out of the way. So we're really excited to see how that works out for us this year, and we'll be comparing them to our indoor seedlings throughout the season. But some of you have since suggested that despite how much easier that method was and how much we've removed ourselves from the equation, perhaps we might still have been a little too overprotective. Because by growing the plants in containers, we'll still need to babysit them a bit, since the temperature and moisture content of the isolated soil will fluctuate frequently with the weather, and eventually we'll still need to disturb their delicate roots when removing them before planting out into the garden. So instead, if they're growing outside anyway, why not skip the container and go straight to the final destination? Sow the seeds directly into the garden, the same way we would with beans, greens, carrots, and many other vegetables later on in the spring. But instead of waiting, just do it now, in the snow. Sound a little nutty? I thought so too. But then I looked into it a little bit and found out that other YouTubers are using this method as well. Links in the description. And frankly, you guys pretty much never let me down. So what the heck? Let's throw a third variable into this little seedling comparison and try to direct sow into the snow. Kind of. Of course, we can't actually sow our seeds in the snow without any soil. Or at least, I'm going to say that now until one of you tells me otherwise in the comments. But our garden bed is also still completely frozen and unworkable. So the easiest solution is to just brush aside as much of the white stuff as possible, and then dump a bit of potting soil on the surface. Pour on some water to ensure that it's properly dampened, and then plant the seeds as directed on the packet. I think I'll still toss in a few extras just in case, since the germination rate is likely to take a bit of a hit. But then just cover them lightly with a bit more soil and we're nearly done. Now at this point, it's still recommended that you place some sort of plastic container over top of them to act as that mini greenhouse. For example, you could use the top from one of the water jugs or juice bottles we talked about in the last video. Or others suggest using a clear plastic tote or storage bin. We also have a few of these plastic domes from some seedling trays, and conveniently they already have vents built in. Ideally, it would still be nice to use some plastic that you already had lying around or that was destined for the recycle bin or the landfill. But otherwise, I think any of these would work just fine. Plus, while looking into this even simpler method, I got to thinking. You know, just about every season we find plenty of tomatoes, lettuce, squash, onions, and many other vegetables just growing up between our rows after self-seeding the year before. They usually start out a little slower than the ones we plant intentionally, but if we just let them grow, they usually catch up and do just fine. In fact, sometimes they even seem hardier as a result of the struggle. And you know what they never have? Plastic domes. So since we're already throwing out all the rest of the typical advice, let's just try a few more patches of seeds. But this time, instead of the plastic, we'll just cover them back up with snow. You know, like nature. But unlike nature, we'd better add some tags to these, an important tip that I accidentally failed to mention in the last video. Because while volunteers can be happy little surprises, we are still hoping to compare these to the other seedlings, so it would be best if I could remember which was which. And speaking about the comparison, please check back throughout the season, because we'll be sharing the results, whatever they might be, as things progress. Personally, I'm really excited to see how this works out. Or doesn't. Oh, and one final point is that if you normally have a thick layer of mulch on your garden, then I think it would be best to pull that aside first, if you can. Because once the seeds germinate, they'll be sending their roots down into the garden soil below, and the mulch layer will likely make that pretty difficult. Plus, if you use hay mulch like we usually do, then you might also be inadvertently giving a fighting chance to some grass seeds that would have otherwise been unable to take root on their own. Then again, at this point, I'm in completely uncharted territory, so who knows? But either way, luckily for us, we left the mulch off of this section of our garden last year as part of our continued battle with quackgrass, but that's a whole other experiment. Anyway, I think that does it for winter sowing because I can't imagine simplifying this process any further. But if you have any other ideas, please let us know in the comments. And in the meantime, thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.